The sun had not yet cleared the marble crowns of Rome when the roar began. 1,000 voices rose from the Colosseum's stone lungs, echoing across the waking city. To the people, this was not just another day. It was a promise of blood, glory, and power. For Rome hungered, and the arena would feed that hunger once again. As dawn's first light spilled across the vast amphitheater, vendors rushed through the archways, shouting offers of honeyed wine and roasted chickpeas. The smell of sweat, oil, and anticipation thickened the air. Beneath the stands, in the tunnels known as the Hypogeum, the scene was far less festive. Half-starved lions snarled against iron bars, their ribs pressed sharply through dusty hides, eyes gleaming with a mixture of fear and rage. Handlers whipped them to keep them restless. A cruel performance before the performance. Each beast was a tool, one more instrument in the empire's theater of domination. Above, slaves scrubbed the arena sand, sweeping away yesterday's blood. It clung to the grains like a memory, dark and permanent. In the emperor's box, cushions were being laid. The imperial standards hung, and guards polished their armor until the sunlight danced off their breastplates. Every detail served one purpose: to remind all who entered that the power of Rome was absolute. The spectators knew this, even if they would never speak it aloud. The games were not mere entertainment, they were ritual. They reminded citizens and slaves alike of who ruled, and at what cost. Trumpets blared, drums thundered. The crowd surged to its feet as the imperial retinue appeared. Senators in white togas lined the marble benches. The Praetorian Guard stood still as statues. Then came the man for whom the city would cheer, Emperor Commodus himself, draped in gold, his face glowing with divine arrogance. He raised his arm. The arena fell silent. For a heartbeat, even the beasts below seemed to sense the moment. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, Commodus dropped his hand. Gates burst open. A single man stumbled into the blinding light, a condemned gladiator, chained and trembling. The crowd erupted in feverish delight. From the opposite gate, a lion emerged, its roar splitting the air like thunder. Dust swirled. The man dropped to his knees, his sword clattering beside him. This was not a fair fight. It never was. As the lion charged, Commodus leaned forward, his lips curling into a smile. To the emperor, mercy was weakness, and cruelty the highest form of art. The beast lunged. The crowd screamed. And as the sand turned red once more, Rome's morning ritual of blood had begun. While the crowd above roared for glory, another world existed below, a world unseen, unheard, and unremembered. Here Rome's heart did not shine with gold. It beat in darkness. Chains rattled, torches flickered, and the air smelled of fear, sweat, and death. Beneath the marble grandeur of the Colosseum stretched a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers. The Hypogeum, a hidden city beneath the arena floor. Here, hundreds of slaves labored endlessly to prepare each performance of blood. Men hauled heavy cages through narrow passages, their shoulders raw from the weight. Others cranked wooden winches that raised platforms and trapdoors to the surface, where animals and prisoners would suddenly appear before the screaming crowds. Every lift, every roar, every dramatic entrance, it was all engineered with ruthless precision. The Romans called it ingenuity. The slaves called it torment. Each morning began with the same ritual: handlers prodding half-crazed beasts into holding pens, gladiators whispering silent prayers, and condemned men awaiting orders. In the darkness, they could hear the thunder of the crowd above, distant yet inescapable. The sound was both their sentence and their requiem. "Faster!" barked a supervisor, cracking his whip against the wall. A team of slaves strained to push a massive gate into place. One stumbled, his foot crushed beneath the mechanism. He screamed, but there was no pause, no mercy. The games waited for no one. Nearby, a group of carpenters hammered together a mock forest for the next scene, a venatio, or animal hunt. The emperor demanded spectacle: lions released from hidden pits, antelopes darting across painted backdrops, and actors dressed as exotic hunters from distant lands. All of it designed to glorify Rome's reach and power, and all of it built on suffering. From the shadows, a gaunt man watched silently, an overseer of the imperial animal keeper. His job was to ensure the beasts were just hungry enough, just enraged enough to give the crowd what it wanted. His eyes were empty. His hands were stained. No one spoke of pity. In this underworld, pity was a death sentence. Above them, the floorboards trembled as the first cheers of the day erupted. The games had begun. The workers below froze for a moment, listening. They could not see the sunlight, only the trembling of dust from above falling like ashes through the cracks in the arena floor. Then came the signal, 3 loud bangs on the iron pipes. It meant one thing: the next act was ready. Cages creaked upward, gears groaned, and the slaves pushed with all their strength. As the platform rose into the light, one whispered through gritted teeth, "May the gods forgive us." But in Rome's arena, there were no gods, only men who played at being them. The gates thundered open and sunlight poured onto the sand like molten gold. The crowd's roar became a living thing, a beast made of 100,000 throats. In that noise, Rome declared its might, and at its center stood a man who believed he was the source of it all: Emperor Commodus. To most emperors, the arena was a symbol of power, something to be watched from a throne. But Commodus was different. He didn't just rule the games, he wanted to be the games. Draped in lion skins and armed with gilded weapons, he descended from his imperial box and stepped onto the blood-stained sand himself. The crowd erupted. The emperor of Rome, the son of Marcus Aurelius, would now fight as a gladiator. It was unthinkable, and yet the people adored it. He raised his arms to the sky, basking in their worship. "I am Hercules reborn," he declared, his voice echoing across the marble. But behind the cheers, fear lingered. The senators watched silently, knowing that a single missed applause could mean death. The guard shifted uneasily. This was no divine act, and it was madness disguised as glory. Trumpets blared again. A massive lion was released into the arena. It hesitated, confused by the light and the roaring crowd. Commodus laughed, not with courage, but with vanity. He hurled a spear, a perfect rehearsed strike that pierced the beast's heart. The audience cheered wildly, unaware or unwilling to see on the truth. The lion had been drugged, its claws blunted, its fate sealed long before it entered the sand. Commodus raised his bloodied hands, soaking in the adoration. He believed the gods watched him with envy. He ordered more beasts, more victims, anything to feed his illusion of invincibility. Behind the scenes, servants worked tirelessly to stage his triumphs. They released animals weakened by hunger or bound with hidden chains. Each victory was a lie, every spectacle a performance of deceit. Yet for the emperor, it was proof of his divinity. By midday, the arena was a sea of red. Gladiators fell, beasts roared, and Commodus, undressed in gold armor, strutted across the corpses as if walking on clouds. Then, in a moment of chilling calm, he ordered the next act. Condemned prisoners were to be dressed as mythological monsters. He would slay them personally, one by one, as Rome watched its ruler descend into barbaric theater. The crowd applauded, but the air had changed. Some spectators averted their eyes. The line between heroism and horror had been crossed, and no one dared to speak it aloud. As the final prisoner fell, Commodus turned toward the imperial seats, blood staining his tunic. "Do you see?" he shouted, raising his sword to the heavens. "The gods bow to me." For a brief moment, silence fell over the Colosseum. Even Rome's endless roar seemed to hesitate, as if the city itself sensed it was watching not a god, but a man who had gone too far. The Colosseum trembled with the sound of thousands, but something had changed. The same crowd that once cheered blindly now watched with uncertain eyes. The spectacle that once symbolized Roman glory now began to feel cursed. By the time Commodus reigned, the games had evolved from tradition to madness. What had begun centuries earlier as rituals of courage had become public massacres, fueled by the emperor's thirst for control and the mob's addiction to blood. He had turned the Colosseum into his private theater. Lions, elephants, even rhinoceroses were dragged into the arena, starved and disoriented, only to be slaughtered by an emperor who fancied himself a god. The citizens of Rome, once mesmerized, now whispered uneasily. Behind the laughter and cheers there was fear. Fear of being next, fear of a ruler who seemed to find joy in humiliation and death. Scene: the emperor's performance. On one sweltering afternoon, Commodus appeared not in armor but dressed as Hercules, lion skin over his shoulders, a club in his hand. He called out, "Today the gods themselves will bear witness." Before him stood a man disguised as Mercury, messenger of the gods. Commodus struck him down in one blow. The crowd gasped, half in awe, half in horror. Then silence spread like smoke. For the first time, the cheers did not return. Seen, the unease of Rome. In the markets, people whispered, "The emperor kills men dressed as gods." In the Senate, fear grew. Commodus's games had become political theater, each death a warning. His madness bled into policy, his cruelty into governance. The Colosseum, once Rome's pride, became its mirror, reflecting a civilization rotting from within. Seen shadows behind the marble. Beneath the stands, slaves spoke of omens. They said the sand no longer drank the blood, it rejected it. They said the beast refused to fight. To some, the gods had turned away from Rome. And as the emperor raised his sword toward the crowd, demanding cheers that no longer came, a chill swept through the empire. In that moment, the people realized something terrifying. The games were no longer about power. They were about madness, and the madness wore a crown. It began like every other day of games, the crowd roaring, the sand glimmering gold under the sun. But deep inside the marble corridors, something felt wrong. Whispers moved faster than the wind. The gods are watching, and they are angry. The empire was dying in silence even as it screamed for more blood. Commodus, now lost in delusion, ordered a grand finale, a spectacle unlike any before. He would face 100 gladiators in a single day and emerge, as he claimed, immortal before the eyes of Rome. But beneath the splendor, rebellion brewed. Senators, slaves, even the gladiators themselves, all had grown tired of the madness. And among them, one man was chosen to end it. Seen the last games begin, the gates opened. Wild beasts lunged out first. Emaciated and desperate, their roars echoing through the Colosseum's bones. Commodus struck them down with theatrical ease, preening before the masses, basking in their forced applause. He had turned divine judgment into a performance. As the beasts fell, the gladiators entered, one after another, slain or forced to yield. But when the final warrior stepped forward, the crowd fell silent. He wore no armor, only the gaze of a man who had lost everything to the emperor's cruelty, seen the duel of fate. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The emperor raised his sword, confident, godlike. But his opponent moved with purpose, not rage. Steel clashed. The roar of the crowd became a storm, then a gasp. The emperor staggered. His golden helmet rolled into the dust. The god of the arena bled like any other man, seen the fall of an empire's illusion. Guards rushed forward, but none dared to intervene. For the first time, the Colosseum, the heart of Roman pride, stood in complete silence. No cheers, no music, only the slow echoing sound of Commodus's final breaths. The Senate would later erase his name from monuments and coins, branding his memory as cursed. But the people never forgot. As the sun set over Rome, the Colosseum stood bathed in crimson light, the same color as its sand. It had devoured emperors and slaves alike. The roar of the crowd was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness that whispered of consequence. And in that silence, Rome faced its reflection, an empire that had built its glory on cruelty and paid for it with its soul.